So one of the quotes that I like, that's from my mentor Virginia Satir, who I actually never met. She's one of the founders of family therapy. One of the things that she loved to say was, "We connect through our sameness, and we grow through our differences." So we connect where we think have the same ideas, same passions, same hobbies, and then our differences is where we're going to grow. So I wanted to highlight right off the bat that you will all have things that you have in common. You all have a belly button. You all have emotions, right? You all have relationships. You've all experienced pain in different ways. And you have things that make you different. And our differences are have the potential to help us grow. And what I see my job to be is, one of my jobs is to hold the space with all of us, to look at those differences respectfully, and to grow together. This is what I think you'll find, and what I've found in doing groups like this is the content of your life circumstances will be different, but the emotions, the change process will be universal. So even if someone's talking about they have kids, you'll identify an emotional truth in what they're going through that will be relevant and very powerful to witness. Because part of what this group is going to be about is, where do you want to grow? How do you want to change? What's getting in the way of you being yourself, being your authentic self? And how can you navigate that so you can move closer to that? The group, and one of the topics that I've put a lot of emphasis on in the last maybe 6-7 years, is this phrase, self-connection. And I think about self and connection as a very, probably the most significant thing that I could put my finger on, which is, it's not just about your identity. It's not about your roles. It's not about your ego. It's not about your job. It's not about the role you have in your family. But what is the self in you? What's the unique signature of your life that you're trying to express? And that's not a steady thing, because the goals that you had when you were 12 are different than the goals when you had when you were 20 and 30 and so forth, however old we are. And they'll continue to evolve and change over time. But what is that energy, or what is that part in us that is growing and evolving? What's the part in us when we say to ourselves, I haven't been true to myself. I haven't been honest with myself. That points to something much deeper, that you can't just say, well, it's got something to do with my job, or it's got something to do with my age, or it's got something to do with my body. It points to something that's kind of difficult to describe, because it's not a material thing per se. Our bodies are constantly changing. Our material self, our physical self, is constantly changing. So anyways, we'll start to unfold this mystery that I call the self. And connection has a lot to do with it. In a way, you could see that self and connection are related. I see it as a process of living, but that connecting to yourself is a very important process. So the universal resources that I'm going to talk about, and they are, connecting to yourself, their truth, being able to be honest and be aware, connecting to your wisdom, the ability to make choices, and then finally the ability to trust. So we're going to go through those 5 resources, and we're going to tap into those resources when we work on change. So each week, somewhat, not this week. This week is about introductions, getting to know each other, setting the context. But each week moving forward, I'm going to ask one of you to volunteer, right? And say, something's feeling alive for me, and I would like to be the star. I'd like to be the focus of the group today. And so in that middle portion, after we do a meditation, we do a little bit of learning, we're going to do a little bit of experiential work. And so we're going to look at those resources. We're going to support the person. We're going to hear what they want to work on. And we'll use everything that we have, our group, what I know about change, to support that individual to look, maybe become more aware, maybe to make a new choice, or to try something different. I like that you use the word dirty, because, well, I think you all have experienced that life is messy. And one of my favorite quotes that I got from our training is, you want to turn shit into gold. The shitty things in life, you want to convert it into fertilizer somehow for the next thing that's coming up for you. And if we can do that, and I've seen that happen many times, and I've experienced that with people, then we're moving in a good way. And I think that's the transformative power of this work and the way that we can move together, is that the messiness, the painful things, the difficult emotions, the toxic relationships can become the foundation, the platform from which we grow. So I hope you can conceive of that possibility, and that we actually experience that. Because we're not just going to be in our heads, we're going to engage our bodies and move around and feel things and connect with each other. So yeah, it's going to be messy. You can see on that there's a black t-shirt, and that t-shirt says, it's Bruce Lee, and he says, knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. So we're going to go through some theory. We're going to talk about some ideas to set a framework for how we're going to go through these 12 weeks and what these resources are. And they're not just, ideas are not just ideas. Carl Jung has this quote. He says, people think that they have ideas, but some really big ideas, they have people, right? Some powerful ideas could change your life. So, insight is not enough to lead to change. How many times do you know it's like, oh, this relationship isn't good for me. I know it's not good for me, but I'm still in it, right? Something needs to move deeply within in our core self and in our bodies before we can apply that change. And I think you all have experienced something like that. So some of the key questions and learning objectives that I've identified in this group are trying to clarify what is the self. And I capitalize the S self to differentiate it from things that you would typically think of in trying to answer the question, who am I? I think being able to cope in the world, being able to find the center, the core of you is very important. It allows you to feel grounded and rooted. So for example, I was working with a university student, and he came onto the call very anxious because he felt he did badly on an exam. And right away, that anxiety, he was like, oh, what did I do wrong? He started to feel shame and guilt and just feeling badly. He was disconnecting from himself. And when we clarified and said, well, how are you in your process? Like, how are you in your preparation? He says, I tried my best, 100%. Like I did absolutely my best. I said, well, don't jump to how you can improve until you've acknowledged yourself, validated yourself. So the way that you live, what you embody, and when that resonates, it's like, I'm acting caring. Caring is a deep value that I have. That gets closer to who you are. The role that we have, the particular title that you have for your job, when you go to a party, it's a very typical way of introducing yourself. I'm an engineer, I'm a teacher, I'm a this, I'm a that. You say, I am blank, whatever it is. And then your identity, the way you think, gets enmeshed with that. So when you lose a job, people feel, how do they feel? They can feel awful, they can feel depressed, they can feel really low in their self-esteem. And we need a resilience to be able to, so we need to be able to identify, it's very helpful to identify some roots to who I am. Okay. Now, it's not the amount of money you have in the bank. It's not, your reputation or how people think about you. Those are all movable things. So the things that are solid but yet transcendent is what we're aiming at here. So what you're talking about is a metaphor that we're going to play with, which is called the Iceberg Metaphor. And the Iceberg Metaphor is a way of encapsulating our experience. So I see this acorn and I get scared and I want to throw it away, and I see the acorn's evil, right? Because if I'm allergic to it, it's going to hurt me. So that's my experience. That's my reaction. Now, I may have let's say I have a phobia. Maybe I should have a phobia because I'm pretty allergic to them. I could have a phobia, and that would be my reactive pattern, my survival reactive pattern to the acorn. So we can't necessarily disembody that reaction from a social setting. It's very difficult because where everything is, most things are embedded, most environments are embedded in a social context. But our reaction, we are not even our reaction, right? So I may have a pattern of feeling a certain way, thinking a certain way, perceiving a certain way, but that's not me because I can change that. I can say, you know what? When I encounter this situation, when I encounter someone with that personality who maybe I find offensive, I can start to move my reaction. So I can move my emotions. I can move my thoughts, right? And so we're going to talk about that the self is the thing behind that. Let's say it's the awareness that allows us to move the form of our consciousness. So the forms of our consciousness, very basically, our behavior, our thoughts, and our feelings, right? If I think that I am my thoughts, and my thoughts are constantly changing, or my thoughts can be like, I can have a really negative thought. I want to kill that person. Oh, I'm that thought. Then I could get really scared of my thought because it's a really ugly thought. So we need thinking about the self in the way that we're going to discuss creates a bit of a space, an important space, like mindfulness meditation does. So we're not reacting. We're not falling into the thought or identifying with it. Okay. So one of the distinctions we're going to talk about is the relationship between self and our roles and our self and our ego. Role and ego, those are not bad words. We have these roles and they change. When we were a kid, we were students. When we're a university student, then we have a job, then we taking on a parenting role. Some of us are caregivers to our elderly parent. Alok, has that as a role. And those roles change and morph over time. So there's a relationship, and that relationship is what we're going to look at, because the idea of being our true self is we can be our true selves, not when we start from the role and try to please everyone or make everybody happy, but when we start with ourselves and really feel rooted in ourselves. So that's going to be a core theme that we're going to talk about.